In this week's exercise, we're going to look at the shape that I showed in exercise 20, which was a practice exercise. I hope that you've maybe practiced it, but if you haven't, this is what it looked like. So if you haven't practiced this shape, then I encourage you to go and practice now, because this is the shape that we're going to work with in an extended version or a variation. So practice this shape. It's a nice shape to draw. It's harmonious and balanced if you're drawing it nice and neatly, not like I'm drawing it here. So you just practice this shape, and then you can continue, once you've practiced this shape, with practicing the next shape I'm going to show you. So the shape that we're going to work with today takes its point of exit in this shape, and what we're going to do is we're going to basically push out these two shapes here, and when we do that, it looks like this. So it's, you know, basically this is the shape that you end up with once you start pushing on the at the center, and you start pulling or pushing. So you're pushing from the inside or pulling from the outside. It's basically extending this shape out. You're extending it out, and then this bit goes a bit flatter, and you end up with this more squarish looking shape. So I would suggest that you start off by doing this shape. Before you then go into doing the variation, and you could also just mention this before we go on, you could also practice putting a little dip in. Once you've done it just going round, you can practice actually putting a little dip in. So you have a little dip, and then you come back out, and then you go round into your bind here, and then you have another little dip at the bottom, and you come round and do your bind here at the side and dip at the top, because the next step, the shape that we actually want to practice, is this shape here. So you're starting with a bind on the side, though you can't see it's a bind yet, and then you're doing a bind at the top, come round and down into another bind, come out of your bind, and then round into another bind, and you finish off with actually creating your last bind. So this is the shape which is shown as a variation in Coutsley's book. And it does take a little bit of practice, but you can do it if you just, you know, put your mind to it and practice. Now, I should just mention that the larger you create your shape, the more distance there is between these binds, the harder it gets. So the closer you put these together, sort of the easier it gets. But you want to make it so that it has this kind of squarish look. Of course, you can make any kind of variation that you want and that you like yourself, but this is the variation that's shown in the book. What you can also do, if you want, is you can, of course, create a little square box. So same height and same width. So you have and as you can see here, I'm not measuring it with a ruler, I'm just thinking this is fairly square. And then what you can do is you can simply start by kind of going round your square with your line, and then start creating movement in your line. So here we are creating a movement in the line. Hope you can see the sort of idea of what we're doing here. So here I'm just practicing simply the creating a squarish form, but a squarish form that's curved. So that this could also be your very first step before you then move on to creating the square shape with the binds in them. So practice this form and practice this form, and then you can start practicing this form, and then you can go on to practice this form. Now, if you're finding that it's still difficult to do this form, what you can do is you can practice these binds individually. So you can go through and you can say, okay, well, so what does the bind look like? So the bind or the line, I want to practice this part of the line. So then you create your line here. Now, obviously I'm going the way. I'm not intending for you to do that. So you just go like that and then round, and you just keep doing this, because you will probably find when you're doing this form that actually one of these sections of binds will cause you more problems than the others. So probably this one will be fine because you've been practicing this one in lots of the previous videos, because of course you've been doing your form drawing with me along through the videos, and so you're very familiar with this kind of shape. And the same with this one. You might find that this is quite easy to do, whereas this one here is maybe harder, or this one here might be harder. It's all about, because here you're actually coming through, you're going through this kind of bind all the way around. So you do the same, you can do the same kind of practice your bind here. If it's this bind here, if it's this section here that's giving you problems, or if it's this section here, then you practice this bind here. Just practice that section of the bind if that's giving you problems, or if it's this one here, then practice that section. So that's the form drawing exercise for this week. I hope to see you next week for a new exercise.